If you've ever tried to make a hoop and you have struggled with flat sides due to the connector point, this video is for you. And only you. Don't let anybody else see it. Hello fellow dabblers, I'm Jess Wagstrom. I make videos about lots of different hobbies and skills in the hopes that it encourages you to try new things without being afraid to suck. Case in point, this video was actually a question that one of my patrons sent in. Robin asked me a question on Patreon about hoop making, specifically what to do when the hoop looks flat where the connector is. She's watched some of my other hoop making tutorials and she's tried it and is ending up with flat sides and she wants to know what's up. So before we dive too deep into this, I want to emphasize that I personally make hoops out of polyethylene tubing or PE tubing, which is slightly more flexy, bendy, malleable tubing, so it's easy to kind of bully into shape, which is what you'll need to do to fix this flat edge problem. If you're working with polypro or HDPE, those tubings are a little more brittle, a little more likely to kink if you're too rough with them, so you can still use these techniques, but you want to be a little more gentle with them. I also make hoops that collapse infinity style, which means instead of cutting one big piece of tubing that I connect with a push button, I cut two pieces of tubing. Each piece is half of the hoop, and then I connect them with connectors at the top and bottom so that it can fold infinity style and then fold again in half for ease in shipping or travel. I just realized how squeaky the couch is, and I hope I'm not accidentally squeaking and being super annoying. I'm doing it on purpose right now. So what causes that flat edge effect? It could be a couple of things. One of the easier fixes is if you are using the end of your tubing and not cutting off this flat edge before you start. Coiled tubing has a natural curve to it, but the very ends are not tucked into that curve, and so they're usually quite flat, and it's not really worth trying to get a curve into this flat piece. So what I like to do is kind of go to where the curve starts and just chop that right off before I even start making a hoop. That's the easiest fix, but if you're in the middle of the tubing, there is a more insidious reason why you're getting these flat edges. So the coiled tubing is going to have a natural curve, and if you're making a hoop that's about the size of its natural curve from top to bottom, then you're going to be fine. But if I wanted to make something bigger than this, I'm going to have to cut a little deeper into the actual curve of the coil, and I'm going to end up with more of a C-shaped tubing cut. That's when you're going to get the flat edges, and there are things you could do about it, which I will go into right now. So the first tip I have is to let your tubing relax. The tubing comes in a coil that is bound up pretty tight. So if you just unpack your coil of tubing and let it sit there for a while, it's going to naturally start to unfurl a bit and be larger so that you can make larger hoops with less fear of the flat edge. So this coil I've been holding right here, this is tubing that's been open for quite a while. It's fairly large. The natural curve is going to make a fairly large hoop. And then this is a coil that is still all packed up. It is much smaller like that. I'm going to have to manipulate this tubing a lot more right out of the package than I will have to manipulate this tubing that's been relaxed. But I want to make a hoop that's even bigger than this, so I'm gonna have to do some work. So this tubing is coiled perfectly to make a 40-inch hoop, but I need to make a 46-inch hoop, which is gonna be bigger. So here you can see, it's not very drastic, but you can see how the ends of this tubing is starting to dip back towards the going this way, and we want it to just keep like going this way. So we want to kind of coax these ends out this away. And the first way to do that is with like this knee cramming technique that I don't have a name for, but we can just call it knee cramming. But I'm gonna focus on the ends here, and I'm just gonna put this on my knee and cram like so. I'm just applying a little bit of pressure to either side of the hoop all the way across, and when I get to the end, cram, cram, cram. You can see how that has opened the tubing up a bit. And for comparison's sake, here is the second half that I just cut. Compare that to the first half that I've already knee crammed, and you can see that the first half is already a little bit wider, whereas if I were to stick connectors into this, what would happen is the ends would just straighten out here and be flat here, flat there, and that's what we're trying to avoid. Alright, So I have knee crammed this side now. These ends you can see are not quite a perfect match, but the next step we're gonna do is going to hopefully fix that. What I'm about to do now also doesn't have a name, so I'm just gonna call it the step and yank. I've got both of my halves of hoop together. I've got one half on the floor, and I'm gonna step on that one half with my foot, and with the other half, I'm gonna try to just take these ends and jam them up. Jam them up like this. I'm not applying so much pressure that this is gonna totally bend the hoop the other way, but just enough pressure to kind of get these ends to loosen up and be a little more willing to curve along with the rest of the hoop. And then I'm gonna flip it over. And I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. I'm stepping really firmly with my foot, so the other end is also kind of getting a push too. So ideally what you want is the ends, when they're cut, to not like start to slope down at all. You want them to be curving up and out. And that's what all of this manipulation is hopefully achieving. And finally, we're gonna actually put the connector in the hoop. Now, the way I make my hoops is I boil the ends in water, and then I put these sort of connectors in. But with this sort of connector, you'll notice it's flat, and there's really only so much you can do to prevent this immediate part where the connector is from being flat. A 46-inch hoop like I'm making today, it can take it. Like, it can have a connector like this, and it's not totally going to screw up the curvature of the hoop because it's such a large curvature. But if you're making something smaller, like under 35 inches, I would recommend maybe like snipping the ends off. You're going to have a little bit of flatness right where the connector is, and what we're going to try to do when we boil is just reduce the potential flatness. A pre-warning, because what I'm about to show you is a little bit risky. Number one, you don't want to do this too much that you over curve your connector ends, and now your non-connector ends are your flat edges. And number two, you want to be real careful about pulling a little too hard on the tubing while it's hot up against the connector and causing it to kink out of shape and have a really hard corner there. I've just done this whole part without my microphone on. I'm a professional. Anyway, I'm gonna put this hoop together and show you what I'm talking about. So it's good to work as quickly as possible, get the connector in one end, and then get your other end on as quickly as possible so that you have the most malleable tubing to work with. This is my first connector in, and now what I'm gonna do is, while the tubing is still hot, just very gently, I'm taking the edges and I'm just kind of very gently pulling down to create a little bit of a curve right there at the top. And you can hear the ends are like clanking into each other. That's good. That means they're meeting up naturally at this curve. Now we're gonna do the other side. Now we're gonna do the same on this end. And you can see before I do this that it's curved nicely, but there's still a little bit of flatness. So it's just really gentle. I hope you can see the difference. I've got my hands on it. I'll do it from this side so you can see. I'm just really gently pushing the hoop in so that this edge pops up while it's still malleable and moldable from the heat. Ugh. This is my final 46-inch hoop. It's never going to be perfectly round. It's plastic, we're humans, we're doing the best we can, but I hope you can see, like, here's the connector here, and then here's the other connector here, and they're both in pretty good shape. They've got a pretty nice curve that flows along with the size of the hoop, despite the fact that it was cut from tubing that was coiled smaller. Ta-da! And that's it. That is all of my tips for getting your hoops nice and round. If you have any questions about this or any other aspect of hoop making, specifically this style of hoop, please leave a comment. I do read every comment. I have been Jess Wagstrom, professional dabbler. I want to thank you very much for watching this video, which today was about hoop making, but who knows what the next video could be about. I do want to hear what you are dabbling in though. What projects are you working on? What skills are you learning? What are you obsessed with right now? I asked this question in my last video, and longtime subscriber and commenter who I refer to in my head as Tasty McTaste replied, I'm trying a depth year, so I'm trying to spend more time on the hobbies I already have and enjoying things I already own instead of constantly seeking out new, which is wise, sage advice for all of us. I've been knitting and crocheting a fair bit, and I'm working on getting back into actively practicing witchcraft. which I guess could be categorized as dabbling depending on how one looks at it. I'm super pumped about your depthier Tasty McTaste. I hope it goes well for you. If you want to share what you're dabbling in the comments, I might read it in a future video. But anyway, I thank you again for watching. My name is Jess Wagstrom. I hope you are having a beautiful day, and I will see you the next time I make a video. Goodbye!